Okay, good afternoon. Is the audio all right? Everything good in the back? Okay. All right, good afternoon. My name is Sean McDermott. I serve as the special magistrate for Flagler County. And let's officially bring this meeting to order. There are 4 items on the agenda, but just some agenda management here. I think there's been a request to move what is on the agenda as the 4th case, the demolition order appeal, to the beginning. And I'm fine with that. I think especially there's the other parties for the first 3 cases. There's no confirmation that they're present. Anyways, but typically what I like to do is if they're, for cases that have paid consultants or attorneys, just out of, respect for that expense, like to knock those out first. So with that being said, let's rearrange the agenda to where the first case will be the demolition order appeal for 2251 South Old Dixie Highway. And then we'll take the other cases in order after that. So, okay. All right, so I think everybody's here for the 4th item, so we'll call that one to order. And just to set the stage a little bit for that, that's a demolition order appeals, what it's framed as. So this is not a typical code enforcement case under Flagler County's code, but it's an appeal that's offered under Flagler County's ordinances, but through their adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code by reference. And then since then, there might be some housekeeping questions for the attorney's office. Since then, I think Flagler County has adopted an ordinance that rather than just simply adopting the IPMC by reference, has specifically adopted certain provisions into the code. So maybe that is a question for the attorney's office here, is that this was, I think when this case was initiated, because the order that's being appealed was issued, looks like on August 26th. I think it was subsequent to that when Flagler County, essentially changed their code and adopted an ordinance that, like I said, rather than just adopting the IPMC by reference with some specific additions into the Flagler County code, deleted that section altogether and essentially adopted a lot of the substantive provisions from the IPMC, but directly into Flagler County's code. And that ordinance, I think, was adopted by Flagler County in just of November of last year. So all to say, it looks like there was some, this case was initiated under certain provisions of Flagler County's code, but in the middle of the flow of this case, Flagler County adopted some new provisions. So different jurisdictions handle that different ways. Whether the case, the county has allowances or provisions that allow the case to flow under the previously adopted code set up that was before this case from the get-go, or whether it shifts to the new provisions. I'm not sure there's any substantive effect that will have either way on this case, but just as a bit of housekeeping, I don't know if the
Did you want me to speak to that
county
now?
attorney's office can speak to that, yeah.
Sarah Spector, Assistant County Attorney. You are correct. The ordinance was not effective until November, which was a few months after this demolition order was issued. However, I do have a presentation that I'll show you to show you that the changes are relevant, because prior to that change, it incorporated the IPMC and any amendments thereto. So we had, by reference, incorporated the 2024 IPMC, which has, for all intents and purposes, the identical provision that we incorporated into the code by that November ordinance.
Okay, so, and I did understand the previous Flagler County Code to state that it adopted the IPMC by reference, but as may be amended. So the currently in effect version there would be the 2024.
Correct.
But what I'm hearing is that this is really a distinction without a difference, because there's no substantive change that would affect the hearing of this case.
Correct.
Like the provisions that have been adopted in the Flagler County's code.
I think there might have been a reliance on the 2021 IPMC during the last hearing, though the 2024 IPMC was actually in effect at that time. So we're going to cover what the 2024 IPMC provides as of today, which, yes, it is the same as, so regardless of when this happened, it was the 2024 IPMC
Okay.
that was effective.
Okay, so with that stated, again, then what this case is it's an appeal that is allowed under Flagler County's code in reference to the IPMC that does allow the ability for property owners to appeal what in this case is being termed as a demolition order with an opportunity to abate. And it was timely appealed, and so that's what's before us today, is just to hear both sides of the party on this demolition order with an opportunity to abate and to, allow the appeal under the provisions of the IPMCC adopted by Flagler County. So with that said, we'll call it to order for the parties to present, and I think first would be the county.
That's fine with the county. I just wanted to point out that it is their appeal, so I didn't know if you wanted them to go first.
I guess I don't have a preference either way. It's their appeal. The case, the enforcement authority is Flagler County. So whatever, I mean, if the parties can agree to something, is there any disagreement about who presents first, or?
I'm good either way,
What would just be
whatever.
most useful?
I have no problem. Typically, the county provides their case first, their case in chief. Basically, our position is that this is premature. We've been acting diligently since we were in front of you in June. We went to the planning board, got approval at the planning board. However, the planning board made significant changes to our proposal. Our engineering had to go back to the drawing board. And we've got the whole summary of permits we've been applying for, all the actions we've taken since June, and that's really going to be our case in chief. So I have no problem going forward to showing how we've been acting in good faith, and we're basically requesting abatement because at this point, since we were last in front of you, we spent tens of thousands of dollars in engineering, application fees, consultants in various areas, environmental consultants and what have you. And so we
Mr.
feel-
Bear, I'm very sorry, but you haven't been sworn in, so,
I'm not a witness, I'm an attorney.
okay. But you're not testifying at this moment?
I'm just summarizing our evidence, ma'am.
Okay, and can you please state your name for the record?
Sure, my name is Dennis Bayer. My practice is located at 109 South 6th Street, Flagler Beach, Florida. I've practiced in this county for 40 years. And I won't say anything else. If the county wants to go first, fine. If they want us to go first, we'll go first.
Yeah, let's do this. So let's start, thank you, Ms. Spector. Let's start by swearing in all witnesses, but then let us move into the county presenting the case first, since that's the enforcing agency behind this demolition order. And then we'll move to the property owner to go after that.
Okay.
But first, if somebody could swear in all the witnesses.
Yeah, I can swear in the witnesses. If everybody who's going to testify will stand and raise their right hand, state your name for the records. Do you swear that the testimony you're going to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, you're good.
And Sarah Spector, Assistant County Attorney. I've compiled all the exhibits into a notebook so I don't have to come up each time. Would you prefer to have those now or at the end?
Now it's fine, yeah, thank you.
The only thing that's not included is the PowerPoint. I will submit that as Exhibit 10 once I'm done.
Okay. And does the opposing party have access to all these? Okay, thank you.
Same with you. I'll give you the password. Okay. As I mentioned, I wanted to go over a little housekeeping at first, just so we know what we're looking at as far as the IPMC provision that we're dealing with. As you mentioned, prior to November 4th, our code did simply incorporate the provisions of the IPMC. At that time, it was the 2021 IPMC that was incorporated because this was adopted in 2023. But as you'll note, it does have the as subsequently amended language. So when the 2024 IPMC was was adopted, that was basically incorporated into the code as well. As I mentioned, I believe during the last hearing, it was 113 from the 2021 IPMC that was the focus of the discussion as far as whether demolition should go forward. And as you'll see, it's pretty long, and it addresses 3 different options available to the building official. So you'll see the first scenario, the first thing that the building official needs to find is that the structure is dilapidated or has become so out of repair to be dangerous, unsafe, insanitary, or otherwise unfit for human occupancy. But then it gave you 3 scenarios that you could consider. You consider that the building is not reasonable to repair, that it is capable of having repairs is your second option, and third deals with an issue that we're not dealing with here today, which is the construction has stopped for 2 years. So previously, we did go proceed under scenario 2. It was your decision that the building was able to be repaired, so we gave them time to make those repairs. Now we have the 2024 IPMC in place. Those scenarios are no longer present. All we have, and I'm gonna, so I can get to the next slide, just show you that this is what's in effect now for all intents and purposes, other than changing code official to chief building official, it's the same as what's in the IPMC. And it essentially says, if your chief building official finds that the building is in a dilapidated state, or what's important here, otherwise unfit for human habitation or occupancy, the building official is given 2 choices. They can order demolition or give them the time to make the structure safe. And here, what we're going to show you is our demolition order actually gave them both options. We gave them the option of repairing the building according to the schedule that they, at the last hearing, testified was a reasonable schedule that was made by their engineers, their experts, that it was a schedule that they can meet. And I'll show you the schedule in just a moment. We then said, if you cannot comply with your schedule, then you need to demolish the building. And that's where we are today. So essentially what we want to put on the record is that these property owners are not authentic and have not demonstrated ability to actually make the repairs. And the reason for that is laid out here, but I've got documents that are in your exhibit book that further demonstrate this. First, this was talked about at the last hearing. This is the agreement they entered into prior to purchasing the property. This was entered into to address a previous demolition order, and it was entered into willingly to address a pending court case. So,
Speak a little bit more about this agreement. This agreement was entered into between what parties, and specifically for what?
the current owner and the county. It's my understanding that the purpose of the agreement was to allow them to purchase the property without the threat of demolition if they agreed to either do the work as outlined in this letter, which the full copy is in your binder as Exhibit 2, either to repair the building or put $250,000 cash deposit by a date certain. Neither of which they've done. And as you can see, the cash deposit was due by August 20th, 2021, and the work was to be done by June 3rd of 2021, so 3.5 years ago.
And this agreement was just, the enforcement mechanism of this agreement was that if the, was the party's names, South Old Dixie Highway LLC, if they complied with the substantive provisions here, in return, Flagler County would not prosecute a demolition and abatement order?
A nuisance claim that was already filed with the court against the previous owners, who at the time that this agreement was signed were the owners.
Okay, so was this part of a settlement agreement then with a case?
This was not really a settlement agreement. It was with the prospective owners who wanted some ease, is my understanding. I'm sure Mr. Bayer will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm basically stating what's in the document itself.
Okay.
There are whereas clauses that provide that it's the purpose of the agreement is to forego the county moving forward with litigation that had already been filed against the then owners of the property,
Yeah.
who the current owners purchased from. That makes sense?
It does. I'm just wondering what the purpose, like how you would characterize what this agreement has to do, if anything, with the current case before me.
Because they've been saying since 2021 that they were going to repair it.
Okay. So just context of how long this process has been going on.
Correct, because I believe what Mr. Baer said is that they've been pursuing this diligently, and that's not the case. So this is the first agreement that they entered into with dates that they set.
Mischaracterizing my statement is we've been diligently pursuing it since the last code hearing. So we're clear on the record.
Okay.
So, yes, the purpose of me entering this into the record is to show that they willingly agreed to do something by by June of 2021 that they have not yet done. They agreed to do something by August 20th that the court has since, there's a court order, which I'll get to in a moment, that requires them to pay that $250,000 into the court. If not, a $1,000 fine per day will accrue. It is currently accruing because the $250,000 was not paid.
And Judge, we object. That has no relevance whatsoever to the issues being presented today.
I'll take the objection under advisement and then.
Thank you.
But you can, yeah, you can proceed.
Thank you. All right. So, again, I'm laying the groundwork here for the fact that there's not been diligent pursuit of these permits or of repair of the building. Because next we have a second schedule, again, presented by the property owner here, that they would be able to finish their improvements and have what was to be a grand opening. So you would presume that they have all of their building permits CO'd and whatnot by Oktoberfest of 2022, which for those of you that aren't in the area is October. So by October 2022, they were supposed to have a grand opening. And they even state in the timeline that they presented to the county that they are looking to fast track this project. However, this still hasn't happened. So after the last hearing, or as part of the last hearing, a third timeline was submitted, again by the property owner, testified to by the engineer that it was reasonable and had been drafted with the intention of building in time for hiccups and any other delays that would be associated with permitting. They said, though, that it was reasonable that they could obtain all permits by October 28th of 2024.
And Ms. Spector, this was the only schedule that was attached to or incorporated
With the demolition order.
the demolition order, correct?
Yes, sir. Because this was the most recent and the one that we were proceeding under with the demolition order, the reference to the schedule is a reference to this schedule. So as you'll recall, not letting me go back. I just wanted to show you the portion of the demolition order that said that you would abate by the time set forth in your time frame, your timeline. And this is the schedule that was that timeline. So again, October 28th, but that's long since passed. Interestingly, though, it's not on Well, you'll see that attend planning board 9/10 is one of the projected dates. That was the planning board where they obtained their site plan approval, which is far short of getting any building permits. They did obtain approval on their site plan. I'm not certain what extensive changes were required by the planning board. The only thing that we're aware of is that they were required to add an 8-foot fence along one boundary line. It took them until December 20th to submit a revised plan complying with that planning board condition.
Let me ask you, so this demolition order was issued by the county, it looks like,
Building official.
by the building official of the county on August 26th, 2024, correct?
Correct.
And it has this schedule attached, which goes back much, like, before that date. In fact, most of the dates on here are prior to the date this demolition order was issued. And so, are the only pertinent dates to the demolition order those that come after the date of the demolition orders, which would be, the next one would be attend the planning board?
Presumably, but it's my understanding that this was received after many of those dates had already passed. It wasn't until the last hearing that they presented this timeframe, which was in June of 2024. I
Right.
can't explain why there were previous dates on there.
I guess what I'm getting at is this demolition order, again, issued on August 26th. What it does primarily is require abatement to make an unsafe structure essentially safe, correct?
Right.
And that was issued in August 26th of 2024. And it looks like the correction order, the way to abate what this order is wanting to accomplish, says it just references according to that attached schedule you have.
Correct.
So,
But then it goes on in the next section, in the failure to comply with abatement order.
well, right, that's like a secondary part after the, first of all, we got to concentrate on what abatement is and what's being requested, right?
Right.
And it's only if what the county is requesting in the way of abatement is not complied with, that demolition would come into consideration, correct?
Right, but they have not complied with,
Right, that's what I'm
The
getting at. You're
abatement,
saying, in
yes.
your case, is they have not complied with the schedule,
correct.
and that's what I'm just trying to nail down here. The schedule that you've provided, like I said, most of the dates were previous to when the demolition order was even issued.
Correct.
So you can't comply with stuff going back in time, correct?
Well, right. So obviously, we were only requiring them to meet the deadlines that were imposed, most notably the permit receipt deadline of October 28th.
And that's, and to that, so it looks like there's 4 relevant dates. The first is attend planning board. Without really any further elaboration, now planning boards can do a lot of functions. What, you said in this case, what they were doing, but it's not in this schedule, but what was before the planning board, sometime, when was it? In November, did you say?
September.
September.
Yes.
Was a request for a site plan approval?
Correct.
Which was approved, is that correct?
It was approved with the condition that an 8-foot fence be shown on the plan and erected.
Well, maybe what might be better is for you to finish your presentation, and I do have more questions about this, but I don't want to, if you, just in case
I cover
you
it?
answer them and cover
Sure.
it, then I'll hold my questions till the end.
Sure. So essentially, what we're showing here is that they have not abated according to their own schedule. I can't explain their schedule. We just knew that they provided an October 28th compliance date to get all permits. Whether they can comply with that or not is not our duty to substantiate. They stated on the record at the June 5th hearing that they built in time so that they can meet those deadlines. So the assertion was made that permits have been applied for. and this is where I'd like to call up the chief building official. What you're seeing here is just a summary of the permit comments. You have the actual permit comments in your binder as Exhibit 5. But as you'll note, all but one is actually noted as rejected. And I'd like to call the chief building official over to explain why it has been rejected and what has been submitted and what still needs to be submitted.
Bo Snowden, building official, Flagler County. So I guess
Spell
this,
your name just so I can. put
just
it on-
B.O.
B-O, okay,
Yep.
then your last name?
Snowden, S-N-O-W-D-E-N.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Snowden.
So at the last meeting, the timeline that it was presented by them. It was agreed upon. They had their designers, engineers all agree to that date of October. The exact date of planning board finishing was 9/10. They could have actually applied for a permit, for a land development permit at that time. As we sit here, right here today, we do not have a permit for land development, and they just applied for a building permit probably 2 weeks ago. That has a lot of issues with the submittal, and that's where we stand right here today.
When this says zoning, a zoning permit or, a zoning, that was the department.
Those are actually reviews for the permit that they have in right now. So the submittal that came in was lacking just about everything. It didn't even make it to the review thing. It didn't even get past the front counter without some stuff. We ended up taking it in, that way we could get get it going. And every single department has issues with the permit and is required corrections for the permit.
And if I can supplement that, the actual comments, as I mentioned, are in Exhibit 5. The reason for the rejection on zoning, it's my understanding that because they've not applied for the site development permit, which, as Mr. Snowden attested to, they could have done back in September, that actually should predate the build, or come in at the same time as the building permit, but they've not done that yet.
I mean, normally the land development permit comes in first. I mean, you go through site plan approval through TRC. Once you get that approval, then you take that and go and apply for a permit with the contractors that you choose to do your project. We don't have a land development permit right now, which would stop any building permit. We can't start building on something without the site being,
Right.
Utilities, everything else that has to go along with this project. And the submittal they did is just for the rooms itself. So there's no lobby, there's no public bathroom. I can't issue a permit that at the end of that permit, and I final it out, they can't open because they have no lobby, they don't have the public bathroom that's required. It's a really lacking in the submittal project. Normally, when you go through site plan and you go through all this, you're paying these engineers, you're paying these designers, you do all that. It's just the opposite. Normally, you're in a hurry to get your permit so you can start recovering your money. This one's the exact opposite, where it's just piecemeal, a little bit of everything. I mean, it's hard to review a plan without the required bathroom and lobby for a hotel or the fire sprinklers. There's just a lot of stuff that's missing on this plan. And that's where we stand
Do you mind
today.
if I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
All right. The plans that you have reviewed, what building code do they refer to?
We did reject they were the 2020 code. They did fix the architecturals, but as far as plumbing, mechanical, every other plan on there, it's still from the 2020 code, which has been out of date for a little over a year now.
And to you, what does that say?
It's the old plans. The plans are really old.
So that it does not appear that they've had anyone working on them.
Well, for this submittal, they're going to have to go back to the designer, have them redo the thing, do all the changes to update it to the new code and whatever else kicks in from that new code.
And,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just real quick, just to get it on the record, you will, and I think you might have said this, but just to make sure, that you will not issue a building permit without first the site development plan.
Correct. That's just standard practice. Yeah.
And the building permit, you wouldn't issue the way that it's been submitted right now without the,
Without the comments being addressed.
and without the lobby, which are in your
Correct.
comments, but
Yeah.
the lobby and the public bathroom.
If they want to do the pool at a separate date, that's fine. If they want to do the restaurant at a separate date, that's fine. But the lobby and the public bathroom will be required in this submittal. That way, when we're done, we can give them a CO and they can go, operate their business.
So just so I'm clear, because every jurisdiction does it a little differently or calls them different things, but the outstanding permits that in your mind need to be done, it sounds like they've had a site plan approved.
They had it approved. You go through approval process. There's no contractors involved. There's nothing, there's no permits involved.
Right.
So you take that plan that you've gone through the process and it's been approved, you bring it, and then we issue you a building permit to where you can start your construction.
Correct. So building, but you also mentioned, is it just the building permits that are outstanding, or did you also mention something called a site development plan? Was that the same thing?
So the
as what
land
was-
development plan, permit is a site plan. We do two separate permits because normally they go in two different times. A lot of times we issue a land development permit and that starts sometimes a year before they even issue building permits.
But the land development permit is different than the
Is-
site plan that they was just approved with?
So,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
where
want to
there's
confuse
a lot
you.
of like
So
terminology.
site plan, when you go through TRC and everything, it's just an approval process. You can't do any work with that.
Correct.
Then you take that approval over there, you get a permit with the licensed contractor listing the subs that can do that kind of work.
What permit? What do you call that permit?
It's called a land development permit.
Okay, so that comes after the site plan approval.
Correct.
Land development permit, you call it.
Yep. So we would need a land development permit, and then along with this building permit, we'd have to add the lobby and the bathroom. And we're missing fire sprinklers, fire alarm.
And just to clarify on the record, the,
Object to comments from the audience. They keep blurting out comments while we're trying to pay attention to the testimony
Yeah.
that's going on.
Yeah, I would ask anybody who's not before the podium and testifying to just to please maintain order. Thank you. Go ahead.
and just for clarification purposes, I keep calling it a site development. but
Land
the
development plan?
Land development plan is for the horizontal work. So you
Yeah.
have a contractor showing what horizontal work would be done, such as the stormwater.
Stormwater, water retention, utilities, lift station, fire lines, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with the one that was approved versus what you're calling a land development permit plan. Some jurisdictions, that's one and the same.
So you go through an approval process. You go through and you have our planning, zoning, you have everyone, the fire chief, everyone. You go through that process. That's just a process. That's not a building permit. So you get approved with that, but you can't go and stick a shovel in the ground.
No, I understand that.
Okay, so we've approved that and they have not came and submitted for a permit to start the work. We approved it back in 9/10. And as we sit here today, there still hasn't been a permit applied for.
Two permits, right?
Correct.
The building permits and what you're calling the land development.
Yeah, the building permit just came in probably 2 weeks ago. We've listed comments and we're waiting for them to respond. And one of those things is we need all the permits so I can do a proper review. I can't approve a building not knowing that sewer is going to be there or not knowing that a fire line is going to be in there for the fire sprinklers.
Okay, but it was 2 weeks ago that building, at least
The
an
exact
application
date?
for
Do we
building
have an
permits
exact
were
date?
submitted?
When it got submitted?
The most recent is, the revisions were on the 7th.
1/7.
All right, and the land development plan, that has been submitted?
Has not.
Oh, that hasn't been
Has
even
not.
submitted?
We can't force them to submit, but it has been approved. If they hire a contractor, they could come and submit for that permit and start
Right.
work today.
But to date, it has not been submitted? Okay.
Any other questions? No?
Not for the
have some
moment,
for you.
thank you.
Okay, I'll
And
stay
I'll
close.
have more for you later. but
All right.
Yeah,
I
Mr.
think that-
Snowden, If you want to stand back up, I just have a couple quick questions.
Okay.
You're familiar with permits for other projects that have been applied for in the county over the last several years, correct?
I would think so.
Have you had any of the permits held up due to delays with FGUA, FGUA, the utility authority?
Possibly. That's planning and zoning there. Once you go vertical.
Okay, but on a land development permit, you have to have all the FGUA permits in place or approvals in place, correct?
Correct.
Also, St. Johns River Water Management District?
That's correct.
So my clients can't apply for that until they get the final approval from FGUA and St. John's, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And also, was one of the reasons for rejection on the permit the fact that the roof cost was not included in the submittal?
I'm not sure. I only go over my reviews.
Okay, but there has been a $200,000 roof put on the building in the last several years?
They did a $100,000 repair.
Okay. But does the roof doesn't need to be replaced at this time, does it?
Not that I know of.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Go too far. So at the beginning, I had mentioned that there's a lack of authenticity here as well. What you'll see here is a financial statement that was submitted in response to a court request. This was titled the April 2024 financial statement. I just wanted to point out a few things here. First, you'll see that they're reporting that the roof is $578,000. The roof permit was finalized in 2022, well before this financial statement was put together. The permit cost that they put and applied for was $112,000, much less than the $578,000 that they're reporting on this financial report. They also just attested to it being a $200,000 roof, and in the last hearing attested to it being a $112,000 roof. So why they're inflating the price of the roof, it's not clear to us. They're doing the same thing with demolition. They did pull 2 permits, only one of which did they actually act under. And in that case, they are claiming $367,000 and spent $24,000. So it's not clear what they're trying to do here, but it is showing that they don't have a true intent here to, I don't know if it's before the court that they're not reporting things correctly or to us, but I did want to point out that discrepancy. Also with the land purchase, I know it says including expenses and interest, but I can't imagine what expenses and interest would bring a $650,000 purchase up to $940,000. So I wanted to point those things out to you. And in addition to not meeting their timelines, they're also not maintaining the property. So at this time, I'd like to call Code Inspector Scott Simon.
Flagler County Code Inspector Scott Simon, sir.
And Scott, did you take this picture?
Yes,
When did you take this picture?
yesterday.
Actually, I took it 2 days.
Oh, 2 days ago, I'm sorry. January 13th, I'm sorry.
And these are not in your packet, but they're in the slideshow, so you'll have them. And they do have the date of January 13th on there. What did you observe when you were out at the property? Because I understand with the with the fence, you can't get close to the
Right.
buildings.
My observation and photograph was from the outside of the property, but looking in at the whole of the hotel, I have noticed that it was excessively overgrown. I did see some evidence of some debris and other trash strewn throughout the area, as well as some rodent harboring. I was not able to get around to the back because that is private property and it's gated off. The gate, however, is starting to fail in some parts, as well as the tarping that was placed over it to keep public view from the property, stop public view of the property. And that has been coming off, worn, and is falling apart. And the photograph documents that down the length of the fence.
So these last 3 pictures I've shown are all pictures that you took on Monday.
Correct.
And I know that one thing we've heard from the property owner is that if there was a problem, why are there no code enforcement violations? Is the property in a condition now that it could be a notice of violation could be issued.
Yes.
And I would testify to the fact that the only reason we haven't is because we have this hearing scheduled and had this process already in the hopper. So, but we do have the sufficient evidence to show that there is a violation of the code for not properly maintaining the property. That's all I had for you, but Dennis, did you have anything?
Sir, have you ever ordered that a building be demolished because the gate was in improper condition?
I'm sorry, I do not, that is not my function. I do not. Oh, I'm sorry. That is not my function as a code enforcement inspector.
And you don't have any pictures of what the property looked like in August of 2024 when this current demolition order was issued?
Here with me right now?
Yeah, as far as
No, I
evidence for
don't.
the hearing.
I don't have it, no.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. In addition to not having the wherewithal to actually move forward with the project, they also don't have the finances available to do
We
so.
object to this entire line of evidence. There's no factual foundation for it. It's all hearsay, and it's basically her regurgitating what may be in other files that have no relevance to this case.
It is a public record. It's been submitted to the county. So I would argue that it does have relevance.
I'll take the objection under advisement, and you can continue.
Thank you. So as was presented at the last hearing, they alluded to the fact that they had financing from Bank of America after having failed to maintain or obtain financing from a Ukrainian lender. Unfortunately, what they presented was not signed. As I had alluded to, there was a order issued by the court that demanded that they either pay that $250,000 that they agreed to pay back in 2021. If they failed to do that by a date certain, a $1,000 fine per day would attach. The owner, in response to that order, filed a motion to vacate and dissolve the contempt order. I'll show you that here, where they're in plain English stating that they do not have the ability to pay $250,000 or $1,000 per day fine. This is troubling because they're saying they already spent $2.6 million, and to get to the end of the project is going to take $8.2 million. Yet, as you'll see here, they only had a $2.4 million loan. And they have $109 in the bank. This is what they were. This is a document that was produced in response to a fact sheet requirement from the court, where they were asked to show what finances they had available. This is what they provided in response to show they could not pay the $250,000, which is very troubling to the county because if they can't afford $250,000 or $1,000 per day, how are they going to do $5 million worth of work? The permit that they have in right now, the cost that they have attached to that is $3 million. And as you've heard the building officials say, that isn't even for the entire building. That's only for the rooms and not the public areas. So if they don't have the financial wherewithal, regardless of timelines, how will they finish this project? So with that, our request is that you uphold the demolition order, because we've demonstrated that they don't have either the ability or the finances available to actually carry out the refurbishment that they have been promising since 2021 and have agreed to since 2021. That being said, the one thing we would ask is if you are not amenable to upholding the demolition order, we do think that they need something in place because to date, they just keep thumbing their nose at any timeline that they provide. So what we would like to ask is that if you don't uphold the demolition order, that you impose a per-day fine. Our code allows for up to $1,000 per day for initial violations and $5,000 per day for continuing fines. We'd ask for at least $1,000 per day. Set it to a reasonable timeline, something that you could or we can work out together. But with actual target dates, that if they don't comply with those target dates, a fine will be imposed.
Ms. Spector, when you mention these fines, I would just ask you to point to what specific provision in Flagler County's code you're speaking to it. And are you speaking of code enforcement fines?
Yes.
So for like, okay, so for a code enforcement matter that has been adjudicated guilty and has not been complied with
Correct.
after the required period, those
Yes, and
types
it's
of
our
fines.
argument that this falls under the code as well, our incorporation of the IPMC, and they've failed to comply with the code in that we gave them ample time to respond, and they haven't done so, or haven't fully done so.
All right. I think
And
that
that's
was
all I have. I would like to reserve time to rebut if possible.
right. I'm wondering if I do have questions, I think, for you that
Okay.
maybe it'd be while you're up at the podium, it
Sure.
might be worthwhile. All right, so I'm just trying to organize my thoughts here. So just trying to get to the heart of this matter, right? What's the issue that is before me was a demolition order with an opportunity to abate, with an associated timeline that was attached to that demolition order. And jurisdictions, when jurisdictions prosecute demolitions, I think as you cited in the beginning, it is for certain limited circumstances, basically under the framework of a public nuisance analysis where a structure is being deemed dangerous, and it's a danger to the public health, safety, and welfare. So a local government prosecutes it under their police powers strictly for public safety. So, I mean, it's an extraordinary remedy that local governments do have the authority to seek if they meet the burden, because it's seeking to stop a public health and safety violation, an imminent, it's a high threshold. Kind of separate and distinct from that, and forgive me for my articulating out loud, I can get long-winded, but it's just the way I'm trying to help frame this in the issue here. Separate and distinct from just remedying an immediate public health and safety violation, kind of under an emergency police powers type framework. There's also the ability for local governments to enforce their code, which might not rise to the level of an emergency or an immediate violation to the public health and safety and welfare. But nonetheless, for a variety of legitimate reasons, local governments regulate property in all sorts of respects, overgrown grass and, blighted property and whatnot. Those are typically prosecuted under code enforcement mechanisms. That is, again, separate and distinct from demolition, but can lead to very real consequences, like you just mentioned at the end there, the imposition of fines if they're not corrected. Ultimately, if it's not a homesteaded property, it can lead to the jurisdiction acquiring the property for foreclosure. So, those, with all that said, that's kind of the way the law seems to work, or does work for local governments at prosecuting property violations. What was brought before me today was under that first kind of emergency police powers type framework, where what was being sought is a demolition, and the criteria and the substance that is required for a demolition is, as was cited in the IPMC, it's a high threshold when it's the structure is so old, dilapidated, or has become so out of repair and is dangerous, unsafe, insanitary, and otherwise unfit for human habitation. Then, like you said, there's two remedies now under the 2024 IPMC. You can, seek abatement, which this order seems to allow for, or demolition. So a lot of the evidence that you're attempting to get in the record here I would say most of the evidence speaks not to, it was going to, I guess when you're looking at something as an emergency situation, emergency violation that potentially could require demolition, whether the property owner is a bad actor or not, whether they have money and resources or not, I mean, that provides some context, but would you say the primary concern of the county here is just to make, deeming the property unsafe, dangerous, what have you, but the primary concern of the county is making it safe, protecting the public health, safety, and welfare? Because, I guess I'm wondering if that is if you could just dig into that for me, like if the primary concern is just, we have an unsafe building, we need to make this safe. What does, whether they have money or, all the other stuff you mentioned, what does that have to do with it? I guess I'm wondering, what does the county want? What would it take to make this building safe, precisely?
Was for them, we gave them two options. They can either knock it down, which they've to date not done, or to make it safe, because it is the chief building official's opinion that it is unsafe and that it does meet, he wouldn't have issued a demolition order if he didn't feel that it met the code. And I don't see in the IPMC where it requires that it be an emergency situation or a threat to health, safety, and welfare. If it's so dilapidated and in such a state of disrepair that it can't be, that it's not fit for human occupancy, which is 100% what we have here because it's a shell of a building, that I don't have the evidence to testify to it today, but there's been quite a bit of activity on that property before the fence was put up.
Right. So you were kind of digging into it. So short of demolition, what would the county specifically need to see
Permits.
that would make this safe?
That they get permits and actually rehabilitate it so that it is a habitable building.
Now, and the only thing I see in the record that speaks to these permits is this schedule that has, those, most of it is backdated, but there's 4 dates moving forward. And it says, one of them, for instance, is addressing a comment from the St. Johns River Water Management District. Why is that a requirement for making a building safe? What the St. Johns River Water Management District says, or if their permitting, have anything to do with making the building safe?
The timeline that you're looking at, we didn't put together. That was something, last time we came here, which was almost a year ago, we went for demolition, that we didn't, or you didn't see that it met that demolition threshold, that it could be repaired. I was asked right here, could it be repaired? My answer is yes. Anything can be repaired if you throw money at it and you get busy on it.
Right.
So we went by their timeline with their permits. All their people testified that said, hey, we can get these permits in this time, reasonable amount of time. I'm sure they added some stuff there. Nothing happened. Here we are again, and they give us a permit that we couldn't issue if we had to. So if we're not going to demo this thing, or we're going to be back here in another year, if we're not going to demo, which I'm okay with, we need timelines in place to where we have to keep them moving to make this building unsafe. It is unsafe by definition of our code. It's broken glass, there's guardrails missing, there's dilapidated concrete, there's a fence that's not maintained. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. It's an abandoned building. It's been abandoned for a long time. Since the last time we came here, there's been zero stuff. They have been doing stuff behind the scenes with getting their approvals, but there's no urgency to get this permit up and going. As far as delays with FGA and all that, it's because they have nobody working on it. I'd love to know if they have a site contractor in mind, and have they gone into contract with them? Because it's been months since it's been approved. So,
Yeah, I guess I'm just, okay, so like this timeline that you have, and I understand the county didn't put this together. It was
They
the
put that
property owner
together.
itself that had.
and they agreed to that, that's what they would meet.
We've been providing updates to the county pretty much every month since the last hearing. We've sent them everything with permitting. Here's what we've done in the last 60 days. We've been giving it to them on a,
And
Sean
9/10
Moylan and Adam Mangle, I've been giving it to them every month.
9/10, they had an approval. I mean, the next day you could get a permit if you want one. They don't want one.
True.
So, since all that I have to go on is this schedule that was attached as the correction order for that's what's needed for abatement. You know, it says attend to the planning board, address a comment from the St. Johns River Water Management District, and I think that's the Utilities Authority. Applications to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and then just a summary note to finalize all permits without any specificity of what permits. A lot of jurisdictions.
Your building permits and your
final-
land development permit and your permits to be able to start construction to put this building to where it's not an unsafe structure.
But that elaboration you just offering, would you agree, is not in this demolition order? All it says is finalize all permits. And I'm wondering, because, jurisdictions consider final certificates of occupancy.
Well, when we talked last time when we were here, it was to submit and get all the permit approvals. That's what finalize all permits are. They would have to
What-
apply and get a permit and start construction.
Right. I mean, I guess that's clear in your head, it sounds
Yeah.
like, of what finalize all permits means. Just me even reading through the record, I was having a hard time
We can
understanding what
ask
does that
them,
mean.
they're the ones that put it together. I
Well,
mean,
right, but it's the county that's trying to prosecute that language as an abatement requirement for demolition.
okay.
So,
You have the transcript from the last hearing where that is what they testified to. So I didn't print it out, but I have that.
testified to what's that?
That it was, that deadline was for pulling all permits to be able to begin work.
Yeah, but again, all permits to be able, for what? To begin, like, does that
Work
include?
on the property.
That would include St. John's district permits and
They need that
FTE,
to pull their
Correct.
building permits, yeah.
but that doesn't include like final COs, for instance.
No, it was just to get started.
And we were fine with that because we'd like to see movement. We're not seeing anything until what we find is happening is we issue something, they react, and then don't do anything. They get a notice that there's going to be a hearing, they react, and then don't do anything. And we're trying to get to where we get them started and keep them going.
No, I understand. Would you, is there a distinction between this county wanting a final project? You know, you want movement, it sounds like, finalize all permits to complete the construction. Is there a distinction between like completing construction and just making a building safe? Because I will say it's not unusual. I live in the city of Gainesville. We've had several buildings, and it's probably happened here, I imagine it has happened here, where buildings sit half constructed and unfinished and an eyesore, to be frank, for years. We've had one, the city of Gainesville had one on the prime street in the city of Gainesville, directly across the street from the University of Florida and Ben Hill Griffith Stadium, where the Florida Gators play, that sat vacant and half constructed for almost a decade. But there's a distinction between being safe and being complete and economically productive and nice to look at, you know?
I think our code defines it as unsafe when it is abandoned like that. It's an unsafe structure. It's fences down, you have dilapidated structure there. So all we're trying to do is get that. And the only two options I know of is demolition is one, and number two is to start construction to bring it to where it's not unsafe.
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard yet at what point it becomes safe, but doesn't necessarily need to be finished. You know, so it sounds like your requirement is just for them to start something ambiguous. I'm wondering, what is the end point where?
The endpoint's to have a working hotel and everything that they present to us. You know, I mean, I guess
That's different than
we're
being
on our
safe.
third contractor for this hotel. You know, I mean, it's just something that's not moving at all.
Would you agree that to be fit for human habitation, you would need to have a CO?
Correct. I mean, there's not even utilities on this project right now. There's no
Okay.
water, there's,
So Flagler County wouldn't allow the scenario that I just mentioned where like buildings have to be finished with a final CO in Flagler County or they
yeah,
are.
that's what our
or they'll
code,
be
that's
demolished,
what our code says, absolutely.
or Flagler County will seek
Yeah,
demolish.
I mean, we would come into an agreement for maybe some temporary, you put the fence around to buy you a little bit of time, but that's not an end game. You can't leave it like that for years. If we see movement, then yes, the county does work with you in that way. We're not really seeing that here.
And the county does have a record of demolishing buildings that are unsafe.
All right.
And I would add to my alternate request that the timeline, if there is one, that a fine will attach to, that we do extend it past permits so that they are actually working on the building to a CO.
Right. And that request makes sense, and I was surprised that that avenue hasn't been done in conjunction with potentially seeking demolition, enforcing the code because of, testimony that the grass is overgrown or whatnot. Like that's that can be enforced through code enforcement mechanisms. So this demolition order was issued on August 26th and essentially gave them 2 months to have finalize all permits done. And that would remedy the county's issues with this being unsafe.
It would turn it into an active construction site. So it'd be just like your typical building you drove by when you came in here. It wouldn't be abandoned. Fences wouldn't be down. The grass wouldn't be everywhere. There wouldn't be garbage everywhere and stuff like that. Yes, once you pull the permits, it becomes an active construction site. And normally, work's commenced and, we're aiming to get to the end goal here. And I'm sure if they have this kind of money invested, they want to get to the end game too. I mean, we don't normally, it's a polar opposite in the building world to spend money on design and everything and then not build your project or build it super slow. That doesn't really happen in our world normally.
Can you pull up the slide because now just focusing on the actual criteria then for demolition in the IPMC, can you pull up, I have it before me, but, oh, you have it right here, never mind. That's the section I was gonna request, 111.1. So, evidence and testimony to meet this criteria would be helpful and distinct from whether, how much money the property owner has or does not have at any given, currently. And what I mean by that is maybe you can provide some testimony or evidence here about, so when the code official determines that any structure is so old, dilapidated, or has become so out of repair and is dangerous, unsafe, insanitary, and otherwise unfit for human or habitation or occupancy, then the code official can order the following. Can you spend some time on how this structure, and these terms are defined, they in the IPMC. So when a code official determines that any structure is so old, dilapidated, or has become so out of repair and is dangerous, unsafe, and sanitary, the word dangerous, for instance, is defined in the IPMC.
One thing I would point you to, I'll have the building official come up and testify to that, but I would point you to the demolition order itself. There's a checklist there that identifies the conditions that were present that resulted in this demolition order, and you'll see those that he checked under hazardous structures or premises. That goes to it being dangerous, unsafe, and insanitary. But I also have him testify to what he saw on the property to come to that.
I mean, danger, there's missing guardrails on the second story. There's broken glass. There's uncapped sanitary. You know, it's in pretty bad shape. I did have a permit pulled for structural repairs, and, you know, the engineer of record said there was issues, and they never did the work, and the contractor came back in and canceled the permit.
What, there were structural issues?
That's what they say. Concrete structural repair is pulled by Tommy Siemens. And, you know, at that time, you don't really know how bad it is until you get into it. I don't know if you're familiar with concrete restoration, where you see these condos on the beach, looks like a little bit, and once you get into it, they chase it 20 feet inside the guy's unit. That wasn't even part of a submittal for this rebuild. So I'm on my third contractor. The second one came in, and it's like, hey, I want to, you know, get going on this, and it's not unheard of to do structural or concrete repairs before the big building permit. So I'm like, sure, that'll get you guys going, and no work was done. And the contractor stated that they didn't want to move forward with it, so he canceled the permit. So you would think that if you're going to build a new hotel, that would be part of your submittal when you come back to get another permit. If it was a concern a year and a half ago, it would be a concern now, but that kind of stuff is missing from our new permit submittal. I mean, there's a lot of stuff missing. I mean a lot, which makes me guess, are they going to go forward with this? But I mean, I thought we deemed the building unsafe last time we were here, per the IPMC.
Right. So a building can be deemed unsafe and have affirmative requirements to make it safe, and that's what I'm kind of just, you know, struggling with here. Before the threshold has adequately been met to have it demolished. So, you know, and the word emergency, when I reference that, that's not in here, you know, I understand that. But anytime a jurisdiction is seeking the demolition of structure on private property, which jurisdictions can and often do, you have to meet the right thresholds that will, the precedent in Florida courts will uphold as being legitimate in the face of potentially competing private property interests. You know, like you want to, you know, there's just real ramifications to private property interests when a local government is seeking the demolition of a structure on that property. And again, it can be done, and it is routinely, just has to have a clear threshold met to survive appeals and whatnot. And so that's what I'm just trying to work through here because, yeah.
Well, I guess we asked it, I mean, if we're not going to seek demolition, we need some kind of timeline in place to where this doesn't sit like this for years and years. I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, 2 months from now, we could get a different contractor in here and, you know, you're going through the whole game all over again. Mm-hmm. So we're just looking for some kind of remedy to this property.
Right. And to that, like, I understand the remedy you're looking for, and it helps to provide context that Flagler County has no allowance for making buildings safe, but can sit, you know, in non-productive use, not fully constructed, like other jurisdictions might allow for. But so given the remedy that the county is looking for, I know this schedule was, you know, drafted by the property owner, it sounds like, based on your testimony. But do you think it's reasonable? So again, the demo permit was issued in the end of August 2024, and for 2 months, you know, the end of September 24, or October rather, sorry, to finalize all permits, whatever that may mean?
That means apply and get all your permits approved. If that's the way we would have written it if we wrote that up. Yeah, it was more than enough time to do what they were asked to do. But we don't really know, I mean, like, again, this is our third contractor. At one time, we were talking about putting a third story on it. At one time, we were gonna renovate. I mean, one time, we were gonna put a convention center on. I mean, it just, so, yeah.
And there's been movement, it sounds like even based on your testimony, there's been movement to try to get permits. They've been denied so far to date, it sounds like. Rejected.
1/7 is when they submitted that permit. That's really the only movement we've had in the last year or so.
January 7th.
And it was a really bad submittal. I mean, you wouldn't take it serious. It didn't even get across the front counter is
Right.
the submittal, so.
Okay, maybe we can go to the property owner and then come back for any questions and.
On behalf of the property owner, I'd call Kim Buck up as our first witness.
Sir, state your name again so I can spell it. B-A-Y-E-R.
Dennis, out of ease, you want to have her use that? Yeah, thank you. Change that one.
You'll stand by this microphone, and I'll stand by this microphone. Ms. Buck, I've just handed the hearing officer as well as the assistant county attorney a stack of documents that you have provided to me. And the front page is a summary of the status of the project.
Correct.
And I think you saw earlier in the county's presentation that submittal that we had provided before where you gave your best estimate of how long it would take to get the permits for this project.
Yes, it clearly states it's an estimated timeline.
And we had put in that document that we thought that it would be completed by October of 2024.
Correct.
And can you just explain to the hearing officer what your responsibilities are as far as this project, what we call the Hotel Henry project is?
We are the civil engineering firm, and we basically design all of the site elements and do all the permitting for everything outside of the building.
And so in your summary, you start with a date of June 14th, 2024. So that was after the prior hearing in front of the magistrate, correct?
That is correct. This timeline is starting in June.
Okay. And what has prevented you, just in a general sense, from completing the permitting work that you were tasked with doing by October of 2024?
A couple things. We had a planning board hearing in August, and it was continued to September. We did have to make changes from the August hearing before we could go back to the September hearing. So that was one delay. We submitted to the Water Management District, to the St. Johns River Water Management District. We requested a review of the wetland line. The first available date that they have was January 9th, I believe,
Of this year?
of this year.
And your
So
request was made back in September?
It was September, between September and October,
Okay.
through that first review cycle.
So you couldn't complete your permit package with the Water Management District until they did the wetlands delineation?
That is correct, and establish seasonal highs.
And did that also prevent your ability to complete the final site plan as far as the horizontal construction was concerned?
That is correct.
So you can't complete your plans for where everything is going to be located until you get the final wetlands delineation and other approvals from the Water Management District?
That is correct.
And in the original estimate that you gave, showing in October of 2024 completion for your part of the permitting, are you responsible for applying for the building permits?
No,
And so that date would not have included actually getting the building permits?
that is correct. That was site only.
And have you been dealing with the entity known as FAGUA?
Oh, FGUA, yes.
And can you explain again for the hearing officer what role FAGUA plays in the permitting process?
FGUA is a private utility provider for this area. And so as we go through the process, we have to obtain permits for water and wastewater from that agency.
And they manage a utility that was actually owned by the county?
Correct.
And have you experienced any delays in dealing with FGUA?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you just give a summary for the hearing officer's benefit?
Not this particular project, but a previous project. It took as much as 3 months to get responses out of FGUA. They are quite frankly, very difficult to work with. And in this particular project, just as an example, we resubmitted our plans December 18th. And yesterday, we received a notice from them that they received the comment or the submittal, and they were just then distributing it for review. So that was almost a month later. It took them to distribute the plans.
So they don't even have their final comments back to you yet?
No.
And again, do you need the comments from FGUA as well as the Water Management District in addition to finish the final site plan?
That is correct.
So at this point, basically, you've received the preliminary site plan approval, and that allowed you to go ahead and process the rest of the permitting?
Yes, it's, the Flagler County has their site development process. We have complied with all of their criteria. We received an approval from them. And so once we obtain the St. John's permit and FGUA, it'll be in a position that if there are any changes that have to be made through those review processes, we would send that back to the county and make sure that they're aware that we made some changes. And then the contractor can apply for the land development permit.
And it enclosed with the applicate or the package that you've just given, you've also included your billing summaries, correct?
Correct.
So you've been actively engaged in working on this file since we were here in June?
Yes.
Ever any indication from the property owners that they don't intend on pursuing this project?
No, they're very anxious and are basically calling me a lot to find out what the status is and, to get it done as quickly as possible.
And you are working on other files at the same time, correct?
Yes.
A little bit busy right now?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions. The Assistant County Attorney may have some cross-examination.
Do you mind if I ask them from here?
That's fine.
First question, you mentioned needing the jurisdictional wetland determination. Would that have changed with the site plan?
It
Where-
can. It can.
But is it reasonable to have requested that that be started some time ago if you knew that you needed it for permits?
It did start some time ago. The process is that the owner engages an environmental company. They delineate those wetlands, and then those wetlands are surveyed. And once they're surveyed, we're able to start our process. We just have to understand that there may be more or less mitigation that's required as we go through the process. But then once the environmentalists, once they get the survey completed and the environmentalist does his report, then that's submitted to the Water Management District and we request a field review of those wetlands. And so that's what's been taking, this is not unusual. In the last, I'd say 6 to 8 months, I have had the district take 3-4 months to get out to a site. They don't have the personnel, and they're extremely busy.
And I'm sorry, I'm just going off the timeline I have here, and it looks like the wetland delineation happened between September 10th and September 11th was coordination for that. Are you saying that it started before that?
Well, our coordination with them, that's not me. Our coordination started with them, but our client would have engaged them beforehand.
And similarly, I have a similar question with regard to the FGUA permits. It shows on here that the application wasn't submitted until September 11th.
That is correct.
Would you agree that it could have been submitted well before the site plan was approved?
No. Part of the delay with FGUA, and I believe this all happened through the site plan review process, is originally our client had an agreement with the property owner in front, who owns the gas station, to go through their property to be able to connect to the utilities, because this site does not have, they don't have an easement or a utility easement to be able to get to the utilities. And so we had to enter an agreement with another property owner to be able to get out to Old Dixie to be able to connect to the utilities. They tried for several months to get a signed easement agreement, and to no avail. And so they tried a different tact. They went to the Holiday Park. Thank you. And it wasn't, when is this dated? I'm not sure of the date.
Top right-hand corner.
Thank you. It wasn't until September 5th that they were able to secure a different easement and allow us to connect the utilities basically through the Holiday Park. And so once we obtained the easement and we obtained new as-built information from FGUA, it allowed us to go ahead and submit our application to FGUA.
Can you please tell me when this water management district permit was applied for? September 9th was the...
September 9th.
I apologize, I see it on here now. That's the first time you submitted to the water management district?
That is correct.
Is there a reason why it wasn't submitted until then, knowing?
Mainly we needed wetland delineation before we could submit to the water management district, but also there was a lot of things, a lot of changes in the works between the public hearings and staff review, and we typically, if something is controversial, we wait until, we know that the project can move forward before submitting to the water management district. But in this case, we had the hearings and so forth, but we also needed those wetland delineations to submit.
And I'm sorry, remind me again why the wetland delineation, you don't know when that work started?
I don't. I don't have it with me. I don't have the information that when the environmentalist was engaged.
Well, Mr. Baer looks for that if you do have it. Would you say that the permit application that you submitted was a complete permit application?
You please identify which permit?
Sorry, the only one that's been, the currently pending building permit.
Building permit?
Yes.
I
That's not you.
don't, yeah.
Okay. Are we going to have testimony from anyone that could testify to that?
Mr. Albano will testify as far as the architectural side is concerned.
Okay. And is it your opinion that the owners have done everything feasible to move this project forward?
Yes. Okay, so this is the narrative. So this is,
That's the final product, correct?
this is the final product that was submitted to the district in November. We submitted our application, and then Carter followed up and submitted their application in November, or their ESA.
And just for the court's benefit, what is the ESA?
Environmental,
Assessment,
it's basically an environmental assessment report.
environmental site assessment.
Thank you.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
And I don't have any more questions if you need to get about your business this afternoon. Or you can stay, it's fine. I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Mengel. First name is Adam. Go ahead, Adam. I'll let you speak for yourself.
Adam, last name is Mengel, Mengel. I am the Growth Management Director.
Sir, how long have you been the growth management director for Flagler County?
2019,
And can you just summarize your experience in the field of planning?
been a certified planner since 1990. Planner since 1996, certified planner since 2001. I think was the date, July of 2001.
So a couple questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Since we're here in front of the hearing officer, magistrate back in June, has my office or consultants for my client contact you from time to time with updates?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Yes.
Okay, so I sent you back in, I think, October, November, a summary from Kim Buck with what they've been doing as far as permitting.
I believe that's, yes, as I recall, that is correct.
And we've been communicating more recently about the status of the building permits and things of that sort.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there hasn't been a lack of communication or radio silence on our part?
Yes, sir. That everything you've stated so far as our communication, is correct for the record.
And in some cases, I mean, how many times have you dealt with a demolition order since you've been here in Flagler County?
Probably down to about half a dozen, maybe half a dozen to a dozen, not very many.
And is it unusual for the county to still request demolition even though the property owner is processing through the county and state permitting processes?
I would say that is unusual. This may be the only instance of that I recall.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Yes, sir.
I do have some questions. So to that last point, have you had an instance that you can remember, and if you can't, that's fine, but where there's been demolition and a demolition order was in effect in 2021, an agreement was entered into in 2021, and we're in 2024 and nothing's been done? Or can you say that, or is that an unusual circumstance as well that we have here?
I would say that's an unusual circumstance. I don't recall something that we've had that has had that, a timeframe similar.
And that's all I have.
I have no further questions. Thank you. Our next witness would be Jim Albano, Albano. Sir, can you please state your full name for the hearing officer?
Yes, James Albano from Bespoke Group, for the architects for the project.
Mr. Albano, how long have you been involved with this project?
I believe since June of 2021.
And in that 2021 timeframe, in your professional experience, were there delays caused in different projects as a result of COVID? As a result of COVID, did you experience delays in some of the projects that you were working on?
Yes.
Okay. And I think, were you involved at all? I think there was a memo here from you in the county's documents dated September 22nd of 2021 with a tentative timeline of construction. Can you explain the circumstances as to why that memo was prepared and whether or not you were able to complete the timelines that were involved there?
Yes, so this is a letter that was prepared by myself and submitted to the building department September 22nd of 2021. So we were hired on June 9th of 2021 as both the architects and as a separate firm, I'm a general contractor, building contractor. So we were hired on a two-prong approach to do the architectural design of the hotel as well as handle the construction of the hotel. So at that point, we commenced on the architectural design, and as well, we obtained a permit for the remediation of the items that needed to be taken care of for that June 3rd deadline for the code violations. So at that point, we obtained a permit to do some exploratory demolition. So we were hired and tasked to look at what was structurally present. And in addition, we were hired to, at that point when we first came on board, the property was unkempt and it was occupied by a homeless community. So we were hired to completely gut all of the units down to its structure. In addition, there was an order that we needed to remove the swimming pool. So we removed the swimming pool, leveled the ground in preparation of moving forward with the project.
So that's the timeline that was in this Exhibit 2, which was the original agreement? Like it was dated May of 2021?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that document, but I was provided with what needed to get completed.
Okay, and it did get completed?
Yes. Yeah, the demolition and the pool removal was completed, as well as a perimeter safety fence around the entire property.
So, sir, are you still involved as far as actually working on the actual permitting of the renovation of this hotel?
Yes, so we're working on the architecture portion of the project. We're no longer a building contractor on the project.
And are you in communication with the actual contractor who the property owners have hired at this point?
Yes.
And are you working out what needs to be done as far as the architectural part as opposed to the contractor part on dealing with the staff comments?
Correct.
And if you can make sure you speak into the microphone. So just explain currently what's going on and what you feel needs to be done as far as completing the permitting for the vertical part of construction for this project.
So the building official provided their, what we call rejection comments. These are comments that are made after review of the plans, and they show the deficiency of the plans or of the whole project. In our instance, we look at what has been rejected as far from the building official. So we have a list of items that need remediation. So it could be required new drawings. In most cases, it's a revision set of drawings that didn't meet certain aspects to their approval.
And at this point, based upon the comments you've received so far, how long do you think it's going to take for you to complete the architectural and then the contractor to complete their comments based upon what you've seen so far from the county?
So from the comments yesterday, the biggest one is the lobby building, which also has the public bathroom. I have to get back with the general contractor. In order for us to complete that portion of our work, we would need the truss engineering from a subcontractor of the choosing of the general contractor. So we would need those documents in order to resubmit our application.
And again, based upon current market conditions, your project load, and what you know of the contractor, how long realistically do you think it will take to get the truss engineering and those other comments addressed?
A minimum of 6 to 8 weeks in order for us to be able to resubmit our portion of the work.
And that's with somebody working on it and keeping off after the contractor to get things
Yeah,
done?
a majority of that time is actually waiting for the truss engineering. Typically, truss companies take 4 to 5 weeks in order to review our plans and provide us documentation back. And we have to submit truss engineering with our permit.
And sir, since your involvement in 2021 up to the present time, I think you said that you addressed the comments that the concerns that the county had with the site back in May of 2021 when you took those remedial steps. Has the county given you any information about any other structural issues or anything specifically that needs to be done to keep the property in a safe condition?
I've had several conversations with the building officials and other people in the department. I would say the key one is the structural integrity of the existing building.
And that will be addressed as part of the permitting process, correct?
No, we're not structural engineers.
And not you, but that will be addressed as part of the,
That is correct.
thank you. I have no further questions.
I do have a few questions. When you said that you need to provide plans for the truss engineering to be finalized, have those plans already been provided?
So we've completed our architectural plans for the lobby and the pool area. However, we do not have the truss engineering, which is not part of our process.
Right, and I'm just trying to figure out timelines. You said it takes about 5 to 6 weeks for the engineering to be done. I'm trying to backdate. When did you provide them with your plans for purposes of them?
We provided the client all of our signed and sealed drawings on November 17th.
I'm sorry, November?
November 17th is when we
17th.
provided all of our drawings.
Okay, perfect. You were originally the contractor on this project?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you the one that, the contractor that applied for the restoration work, the concrete repairs of the building?
No.
No, okay.
I was in charge of the demolition, the cleanup, and the removal of the pool, as well as the roof repair permit was under my company.
Okay, and you just testified to the structural integrity that it's not you that will attest to that?
That is correct.
Okay. Has a permit application been submitted that indicates that structural integrity will be addressed?
I don't believe a permit is required for the structural integrity. I believe that the building official is looking for some professional engineer or some party to attest that the building is safe to move forward.
Yes. But that's not something that you can attest to?
No, that is correct.
Let's see here. Are you currently working with a contractor?
Yes. As architects, we're working with the contractor to provide documentation and support for him in order to get his permit and then ultimately do the construction according to the plans.
Is that the same contractor that was mentioned at the last hearing? The name is escaping me at the moment.
I wasn't at that last hearing. I can't attest to that.
Who is the contractor?
The contractor currently is Calma Construction, C-A-L-M-A.
That's the right name, yeah. That's who it was the last time. Okay. Did you play any part in putting together the permit package that was submitted for the building permit?
I provided the plans, and then there was a couple of comments or questions from the general contractor. So I provided documentation or information to the contractor, but the contractor is the one that submitted the permit.
Okay. So to your knowledge, was everything submitted that needed to be submitted to be able to pull a building permit?
From a architectural and what we call MEP plans, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, yes. I was unaware that the plans that were signed and sealed by the MEP engineer were outdated.
Understood. And going back to, and I'm sorry if I missed your answer to this, going back to the timeline that you prepared, it had a date of Oktoberfest 2022 as a grand opening. And are you saying that, what is the reason why the work wasn't done by then?
So we were hired in the beginning of June, and this was to be a fast-track project based on what the client expressed to us. As a matter of fact, the following month, our team and the owner's team flew to Scottsdale, Arizona, where we looked at a hotel that we wanted to mimic So at that point, it was our belief that it was going to be a fast-track project, and I was asked to put a schedule together based on that.
But was there anything extenuating other than, Mr. Baer mentioned COVID, anything other than that that would have precluded you from, or you being the general you, from completing the project on this timeline?
What precluded, can't pronounce that word, I apologize, but what prevented us from moving forward was a lack of understanding between the owner and ourselves as far as construction costs and a construction agreement. So we would still be the contractor today if we came to financial terms, but we were unable to do so.
Understood. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate your testimony this afternoon.
Mr. Baer, does that conclude your?
If I can have just one moment to confer with my client? Just a second. We have nothing further at this time. I just reserve for closing arguments.
Mr. Baer, if you will, I also have a couple questions for your, the property owner. So at the heart of this case, what seems to be what the county is requesting through this demolition and abatement order is they are requesting, they made a finding provided in the demo order itself in written form and also testified to today, made a finding that this structure meets the criteria for demolition under 111.1 of the UPMC. I haven't heard any testimony from your end disputing those findings. What I have heard rather is like testimony dealing with disputed timelines or just, evidence showing that the progress, what has happened factually, the progress that your party has been making or attempting to make. And so when the county has made these findings under section 111.1, that the structure meets that criteria for abatement and or demolition, what they have required for abatement is that they just want to see, what they have required is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on my understanding, that 2 permits are approved and issued by Flagler County. One is the land development permit, and the second one is a building permit.
Correct.
Now, so the real dispute that's been focused on today just goes to primarily the timeline of when that gets done. And what the county has requested in their demolition order was based on what was attached and called this estimated project schedule that had a date to finalize all permits of October 28th.
That was engineering permits. That was not building, that was from Kim Buck, the engineer on the project, to get St. John's Water Management, FAGUA, and the other documents. But if you don't mind my interrupting, they issued the demolition order before we even went to the planning board. And as Ms. Buck testified, typically you get the planning board approval and then you really go after the permits because things change at the planning board, like they did here, where the site plan changed a little bit at the planning board. So,
Right.
That's the thing is until we finish her permitting, we can't finish the site development plan with the county, and until we have the site development plan, we can't finish the building permit.
No, that's correct. And I also work in the realm of land use and development, and I get all the contingencies and the things that, timelines and things that may happen with as development progresses. I guess what seems clear to me is the county made a finding as to the properties, the structure's condition. They have 2 requirements that they want your, the property owner to accomplish, like I've mentioned, those 2 permits. My question to you is what would be a reasonable timeline that your client can agree to to in fact have those two things done to
So-
forego demolition.
So the problem I have with this particular case, and I agree with the comments made by Mr. Albano and by, um, by Mr. Mengel, this is a very unusual situation. Because at the same time, we've got the entity that's pushing for demolition, that same entity is reviewing the permits to issue the permits. So I'm not saying there's a conflict of interest there, but it's just, it's kind of a hard one to, at the same time I'm working with Mr. Mengel and saying we're submitting all the permits, the other time I'm fighting with the county attorney's office to get additional time. So I think what you heard from Mr. Albano, and this is unrefuted, 4 to 8 weeks to get the truss engineering done. How much longer it's going to take after that, I don't know. You've heard from Ms. Buck that they aren't even going to come out, the Water Management District won't even come out until January 9th to do the final wetlands delineation. I don't have any problem coming back with a 60-day update in front of you saying this is where we are, or continuing to keep the county apprised. I mean, we've given them everything we submitted to the Water Management District. Every time we submit, resubmit, get an RAI from the Water Management District, I've been doing my best to send it to the county as soon as we get it. And I'll continue to do that. So I just can't give you a drop dead date of 120 days or 180 days or whatever the case might be. I have no problem, like I said, coming back in 60 days or having some type of Zoom conference with you saying, okay, this is what we've done. Here's our timeline that we've done in the last 30 days. I don't have a problem doing that.
Right. Well, yeah, Mr. Bayer, I mean, updates are certainly appreciated. The thing I'm trying to drive at here, though, is, there has been no dispute as to the county's findings that the criteria, the substantive criteria in 111.1 have been met as far as the structure is concerned. So what seems to be at issue after hearing both sides here, again, it is a timeline for abatement. So if in other words, if we have a structure that meets the criteria for demolition under the code, and the county is offering an opportunity for abatement, with the weight of all the testimony and discussion today has been about the timeline to accomplish that abatement. With understandable perspectives, to be honest, on both sides, and nonetheless, what seems to be the crux of the case is still attaining that abatement. And what's interesting is what the county's asking for abatement is just that those two permits be approved and issued. As anybody who works in land development knows, that doesn't guarantee even that the structure will get completed, because you can get building permits and land development permits, and then, things go south and nothing happens. Nonetheless, that's what the county that's all they're asking for abatement purposes, to forego demolition, because I think, just to paraphrase what they said, they just want to see movement. Given all that, again, the crux is, when can that abatement in fact be accomplished? They've given a date that has, that they have testified that wasn't accomplished, and therefore they're seeking demolition. And what I'm asking is, I know it's hard to, just that's what I'm asking is, what is a reasonable time in your perspective to require that abatement to forego demolition?
Have a moment?
Absolutely.
Years ago.
After consultation with the professionals and with my client, we think realistically 180 days would be required, assuming we can get the water through FGUA and get that finalized. But I think it sounds like the site plan permit, the horizontal will be quicker and easier to obtain, but I just say we have both of them within 180 days. Plus, I told my client they need to get out there and mow and get that shade cloth back up on the fence and do some of those other ministerial things right away.
All right. Thank you for that. I will turn to the county to see if the county's amenable to that timeline. Under the, and I'll just tell you what I'm thinking is the potential to issue an order upholding the county's demo order and the findings made therein, but amending two things. One, clarifying exactly what is needed for abatement, meaning those two permits that we talked about previously that need to be in fact issued by the county. And second, the timeline of what has been proposed as 180 days. With, the consequence therein being if that, the order would be upheld. So if the 180 days was not met, the demolition order is in effect. So if there's any questions to that regard, I'm just looking to the county for your thoughts on those, on that path forward.
I guess what we're struggling with is, and yes, our demolition order abatement was getting those two permits. That was based on the testimony from Ms. Buck that the timeline that they prepared was reasonable and attainable. So we were under the impression that they'd be moving along under that timeline and would have everything done and ready to start. I don't think it's enough now that we just have a timeline for the permits. As I mentioned, our request would be to extend it to a certificate of occupancy. We can, with a timeline along the way for meeting those, critical timelines. Because, honestly, with all due respect, they're just telling us now that they haven't gotten truss engineering, but their plans are from a 2020 building code, meaning it's been at least a year since anyone touched them. And they still don't have truss engineering. So just getting a permit at this point is not enough. And I don't think 6 months is reasonable for that. In that they originally said that they only needed 2 months.
Good.
In your timeline, it
That was for
absolutely
the
says.
engineering permitting. That was from Kim Buck, the engineer.
That's not what was testified to at the last hearing. And I'll pull the transcript.
I understand the dispute on the timelines and what was meant or understood to be as far as the timeline. What I'm concerned with though is just here and now under this demolition order, what is a reasonable timeline for abatement that accomplishes what the county's looking to have accomplished, but provides enough time to and to make it clear what exactly is required. And so when the county mentions now wanting further requirements for abatement than what was articulated in that demolition order, that might bring a new set of issues that is outside the scope of what your demolition order currently states. Because your demolition order, and that's what I'm trying to potentially clarify here, just says finalize all permits. And now, through the testimony today, clarified that my understanding of what that meant were those two permits. You have to keep going back to it, but a building permit and the land development permit. I didn't hear the requirement for a final CO. In fact, I think you affirmatively said that that was not the case for what was meant by your current demolition order. And so I'm trying to find a way to uphold your demolition order given the substantive findings of the structure meeting the requirements for demolition under 111.1 with no evidence to the contrary presented. Trying to uphold that at the same time as cementing those two issues with your current demolition order that I've mentioned. One, clarifying exactly what's needed for abatement and what it sounded like based on your testimony today were those two permits. And two, just a reasonable timeline that, for those to be accomplished. Now, keep in mind, if, it sounds like what your concern might be is if the property owner went forward and actually acquired those two permits sometime within whatever the timeline is, and then had no further progress after that point, the county would still have options as far as how to further prosecute that. So, there would be future options and future ramifications if and when that hypothetical scenario amounted. But I'm just trying to stick to within what the demolition order currently before me was requesting for abatement throughout this process. And again,
There was a misstatement earlier. We will not hold up permits for state permits. So the fact that they don't have their water management district permit yet is not an issue. And we have a generally available letter from FGUA, which I understand is enough for us to approve the site plan, the site development. To issue the site permit, I'm sorry, I'm learning all this. So I wanted to correct that in the record so that we could take that into account when we're coming up with the timeline. Because their delay in getting the other permits will not affect them with the building permit with the county, or the site permit with the county.
Just so we're on the same page, site plan has already been approved. It's the land development permit that we need that I thought required water management district in Fagua. Adam's shaking his head, yes? Yeah, so that,
Nomenclature for us, land development permit and a commercial site development permit are identical, or site permit. And so the approved site plan is the step that leads to the issuance of the land development permit or the commercial site permit.
okay. And I think what my understanding was the site plan approval, that first step has already been acquired.
Right.
What's still outstanding is that second one, the land development permit, and then also the building permit.
And the step with the land development or commercial site development permit would be a contractor for the site work would come in and submit for that. And that's the step that I think is lacking at this point. Just a contractor come in, present that permit application with the approved site plan.
but do the wetlands need to be delineated on that and the other water management district criteria met?
The wetlands should be avoided, and I think we've already got them at least conceptually shown. I don't think we had any real doubt that they were. I mean, if they move around,
With the
then
buffer?
yes, sir. Should be shown. Should be with a buffer, and then avoided on site. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And just one point, more technical than anything. I mean, at this point, we still haven't received a list from the county, other than the issuance of these permits, what it would take for us to make the building so it is not dangerous, so it is not unsafe, and it's not insanitary. So, other than issuing for the permits, so as far as the technicalities today, we haven't heard that from the county.
I think my understanding was what the county is requiring to meet exactly what you're stating is the completion of the building. And so, but at least what they had required in this demolition order, as far as abatement, was not necessarily completion of the building, but just to acquire those two permits.
Sure.
In their terms, to show progress. That doesn't, like I said just a minute ago, doesn't forego that once you acquire those two permits and then things stalled out, that they couldn't just pick right back up on the demolition path. But, okay, so then with that stated, is there any questions by the county, or did the county understand kind of where I'm going with this, and I'm still looking for maybe,
Yes, just that the 6 months is not reasonable. So,
We'd agree to 9 months. Just kidding.
I'm understanding that 90 days would be more than sufficient to get the permits. They could get the land development permit tomorrow if they just had a contractor submit the permit application. You previously said 2 months was sufficient, so we're giving you
I
another
don't know where
month.
you're getting the 2 months, but
Okay.
so I'm hearing 3 months and then
3
6
months.
months, or vice versa. Ideally, there would be agreement rather than me just picking, but
can try 5 months. I just can't. There's so many factors that would go into it. We could ask for 5 months. We can get the land development permit sooner. We can get that within 45 days. That's not a problem. It's just getting the right contractor on board and whatever needs to get that, that part of it done is not a problem. It's
Yeah.
just the actual building permit needs some work. And just so we're clear, the trusses are only for that one portion over the front office way. The rest of the building, the trusses, there's no additional truss work that's required. It's not the entire building.
think based on everything, I think I'll stick with a 5-month timeline, just because, because it will be in the context of upholding the county's demolition order, meaning the ramifications for not doing it are severe. It's demolition of the building. And so I think it's, and based on the disputed timelines that have been presented today, and just knowing the contingencies and things that can happen in the world of development and getting permits, I think, a fair option that will potentially accomplish what the county wants to accomplish, but also providing a reasonable time period as agreed to by the property owner. I think that's what I'll go with. And so, again, then to state the outcome here is, this again was an appeal of the Flagler County's demolition permit order. I am going to uphold their demolition permit order and affirm their findings that the building meets the criteria for demolition under 111.1 of the UPMC. And with the amendment, just to clarify what exactly is needed for abatement and what is needed for abatement, just one last time to state it on the record is, and this will be reduced to writing in order, is an approved land development permit from Flagler County, as well as an approved building permit for the property. And those both have to be done within 5 months of the date of the order. And if that doesn't happen, again, the demolition order is just affirmed in the respect that it allows or has provisions for the failure to comply with that abatement order, which includes causing the structure to be demolished.
Can I clarify one thing about the building permit too? Is that's going to include fire sprinklers and fire alarm. It's really hard to do a review on a building if they don't have that included in there. But we do separate those permits because it's a fire contractor.
Okay, what do you say that again? So like, what do you mean exactly by the building permit that's needed? Yeah, because we want to make sure we get the abatement required.
So along with the building permit, we need the fire alarm and the fire sprinkler permit. It's hard to review something if they don't have the chase. Like, for instance, one of my comments was, there's no riser room spec'd out on the plan itself. So I don't want to approve the building permit, and then when we get close and they apply for a fire permit, there's no room, there's nowhere to put it.
Okay.
So I would say the fire alarm and fire sprinkler would be part of that
And
also.
that's a distinct permit that's not part of. the
Correct. We do
building.
separate them because of fire.
Okay.
Okay.
So then the abatement will require, just to be precise and clear, the 3 permits,
Land development permit,
right?
building permit, a fire sprinkler, and a fire alarm.
Oh, those are 4 permits then? Those are separate?
Normally, because, unless it's done by the same contractor, which it really never is, so we do separate them.
Fire alarm and fire sprinkler. I'll just list those 4 requirements.
Okay.
And can I ask for clarification on one thing? If they don't, so the trigger is going to be obtaining an issued permit within 5 months from today. Is the demolition order self-executing if they do not?
That's right, the demolition order just, that's it. Yep, the demolition order would still be in play. I'm just affirming your order here, so there's no more, further avenues for appeal to come back to me at that
That, I
point.
just wanted to clarify that on
Right.
the record.
It's just that is, the consequences as articulated in the Flagler County's order for the failure to comply with abatement, which includes demolition, would go into effect. So. All right, I think that settles that one. And with that, I'll close this case, and we can move on to the next case unless we need a time for a recess. Right, I draft the orders fairly quick, so it should be within a week. Mhm. I don't, I'm okay. Okay,
Tommy, I need a second. Thank you.
okay. We can adjourn for 5 minutes? Is that, all right, let's do that.
Mine isn't as exciting. Mine's not as exciting.